We are actually in the process of going through manifestation mastery, the art and the practice of manifesting, because what we believe is that whether you know it or not, you're creating your world with your thoughts, your emotions, your words, and your actions. And we just went through this idea. This whole thing started with Myrtle, who basically had tuberculosis, and she wound up healing herself by using these tools. Because what happened is, up until that point in time in her life, she had been living very unconsciously, and she was a victim. She was what I call an unconscious victim. And so, woe is me, there's nothing I can do about it. I guess I just got to deal with these cards that were dealt me. There's nothing I can do to change this. But what happened is she started to change. She started to get to be exposed to what I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is some different thoughts, some different ideas, what I'm going to call truth principles. So she goes and she sees E.B. Weeks, and she comes away from the lecture and she proclaims, I'm a child of God, therefore I don't inherit sickness. And from there, she changed. In that moment, she changed from being an unconscious victim to what I'm calling a very conscious creator. And that's what happened. And she started this idea of what are the tools of creation, which were her directive power. So in other words, energy is there, but you can actually move it. Well, how do we move it? We use our directive power. Great, Mike, what's our directive power? Our directive power, our thoughts, our emotions, our words, our actions. That's what your directive power is, right? And then we combine that, I don't have it up here this time, but we combine it with substance, spiritual substance, which is the stuff that's out there, and anything can be formed from spiritual substance, and we get to create things in our lives. And that's what happened with Myrtle. So how did all that process begin? Was she started doing what I'm referring to, or what I call as her inner work. Why did she have to start doing her inner work? Because she was brought up and she was taught that she was weak, she was frail, her body was never going to be strong, and she had all these thoughts and all these beliefs inside of her head that were simply not true. And so she started to do her inner work, and the way she started doing that was she started it with doing a belief inventory. For her, it had to do with her health, obviously, because she was dying of tuberculosis. So she started right there. And you talk about having literally a gun to your head. She either did this or she was going to meet her fate of dying from tuberculosis, because it was a death sentence at the time. And so she dove right in and she started doing a belief inventory, and her beliefs look something like this. I don't know if that's all of them. I'm sure there were some other ones in there. But what I said is she went, we're not doing that anymore. And so she started to change her beliefs, and they probably look something like this. Again, I'm not sure if it's all of them, but I do believe that they are some of them. I want to talk about this thought or this idea that Myrtle had, because I think it's super, super powerful. So again, remember, she was exposed to different information. And I promise you that if you've been going to any type of traditional, I'm just going to say fundamental religion, the thoughts that you're going to hear at Unity are going to be different. They are, because guess what? We're different. We're different. It is. And it doesn't mean we're better than, it doesn't mean we're smarter than, it doesn't mean anything. It just means for some of us, it's like, hey, wait a minute. I know there's got to be something more. There's got to be something more than the traditional message. What could it possibly be? And that's what happened with Myrtle. She started to study truth principles. And so you're going to say, okay, well, great. Then what are some of the truth principles? And I'm going to talk about a few of them, but I just want to share this with you, that this is not an exhaustive list. In other words, there are other truth principles that are out there. But I want to talk to you about some of the basics ones that she started to learn about when she went and saw E.B. Weeks, and she started studying other New Thought authors at the time. She started talking about things like, and they started talking about, well, who's God? Who am I? And then how do I actually use this stuff that I've got inside of me to create a reality or change my reality? She also learned about this thought or this idea of the power of affirmative prayer, right? And she also talked about how to embody these principles, because she knew something had to change. It wasn't just these thoughts. It was like, yeah, but I got to change everything else as well, and I got to start looking at all these different things. So in this moment, and when I say moment, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks or a couple of months or what it was for her, but she literally did a complete about face with many, 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 many of her beliefs, right? She went in and she looked at some of the old beliefs that I just shared with you, but there's some other things when we talk about God or who God was or who she was or these other things. And I want to talk about them for a minute because I think it's important that you know what she was thinking. Now remember, her background was traditional Christianity, fundamental Christianity. And again, as I share this with you, please understand something. That's my background. I was a fundamental Christian. So I don't come here picking on. Well, I can poke a little bit because I was one, and I can appreciate it. But I'm not here to say we're better than or anything like that, so just let that go. If you're doing that, let it go. I'm not doing that, okay? I'm just telling you, this is what happens from a fundamental Christian standpoint. Even when I was, this is what was in my head. So, who was God? Well, there's two forces. There's good, God, there's God, good, or there's evil, right? God is an old white man who lives in the sky. Right? He loved her, but only if she followed his 10 rules. If she did, she would spend eternity in heaven. If she didn't, she would spend it in hell. And God only had one son, and that was Jesus Christ. That is and what Myrtle believed because she was a fundamental Christian, right? So what did it say about her? Who was she as a result of this? Well, first of all, she was separate from God. Second of all, she was a sinner born in original sin. Inherently, she was flawed. She was not good, right? She needed to be saved. Obviously, she's a sinner. She needs to be saved. And if she accepted Jesus Christ into her life, her sins would be forgiven and she would be saved and could live in heaven at that point in time after she died, as long as she continued to follow the 10 rules, okay? Now, I'm sure, there was nothing she could do about her life or her circumstances. Now, I'm sure for those of you who have any inkling about Christianity would say, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Gets us in the ballpark. I think that's pretty close, right? And that was Myrtle's reality until she was exposed to this new information, right? But did she have any inkling prior to that about her directive power at all? No, she was a victim at all. Did she know anything about affirmative prayer and how that works? Not at all. How about her spiritual practice? Did she have a spiritual practice other than begging God to heal her? And so there's Myrtle, right? And then all of a sudden she starts studying this. She gets exposed to these truth principles. What are some of the truth principles? Well, let's talk about that. What we believe, what Unity believes, which makes us a little bit different, is what comes down to these truth principles. And again, there's more. But there's only one ultimate power in the world, and that's God, and that is God is good. God created all things, and therefore it created her, right? God was both feminine and masculine. Just like Jesus, she too was a child or expression of God, the good. She was not separate from God at all, right? She was loved by God unconditionally, right? By consciously applying her directive power, her thoughts, her emotions, her words, and her actions, she became a powerful co-creator with God. She used affirmative prayer as a tool to make changes in her life, and she realized that she was more than her body, but actually she was a spiritual being. These are some of the foundational truth principles that we believe at Unity, and which makes us a little bit different than the traditional message. Again, I'm not knocking the traditional message. I'm just saying we do believe things differently here. And this is what happened to Myrtle, is she started to studying these truth principles, and then eventually Charles, and then voila, you've got Unity. Okay? Oh, learning these principles was not enough. She needed to use and apply these principles, of course, because it's great to sit here and listen to the stuff and hear me talk about them, but if you're not going to apply them in your life and try and make a difference in your life, then what are we doing? What are we doing? Right? All right. So, do you think after she started looking at this stuff and started really applying her directive power and started developing a spiritual practice, do you think things started to change for her? Yeah, just a little bit? Yeah. And how long did it take her to heal? I mentioned this last year. 2 years. It took her 2 years for it to go through, right? So things started to change for her, but I wanted to go inside of her brain, and I just keep channeling Myrtle, because I'm like, tell me what was really going on at that time, because I'm just so curious, right? And so she changed what she believed. She believed there was only one force in the universe and that it was good. There was no other person, there was no other place, there was no other thing or even condition that was more powerful than God. Nothing. And that included, for her, illness. Illness. Who was she giving all her power to up until that point in time? Tuberculosis. Well, what does everybody say tuberculosis will do? It'll kill you. So guess where she was giving all her power to? That belief. More than God. You ever do that? Everybody go like this. Yes, I do. I do that. We do that, right? So there's only one force. That's God. God is good. She was loved unconditionally. She didn't need to be saved from anything. God was a loving God that loved her, right? Like Jesus, she was a child of God. She was not separate. She was one with it. And at her core, and we believe this at Unity, at your core, we really do believe that you're good. Now, does that mean that there aren't people out there doing some really screwy things? No, come on. We're not in denial, but we also believe that they have just simply quit paying attention to what's inside of them, and they're just off. They just are. And when that happens and you become disconnected from it, then what happens is you act certain ways and you do stupid things, in some cases horrific things. But we still believe that at the core of every single person, in their heart of hearts, at the core of it, they are good, right? Jesus showed her what was possible for everyone, not just him. There's a saying at Unity goes that we believe that Jesus was the example, not the exception. And then everybody goes, blasphemy! But we're not saying that. Jesus was amazing. He was an amazing teacher. He did amazing things. I love Jesus. I've got an amazing relationship with Jesus. But I really do believe it when he said, this and far greater things shall you do. I don't think that was a misprint. I don't. We just think at Unity that what he was saying is, hey, the same thing that's in me is in you. That's what we believe Jesus was saying. And that's what we believe his message was for everybody. And so therefore, everybody has inside of us what Unity calls, what other places call, other New Thought movements called the indwelling Christ. In other words, we all have a seed of the divine inside of us. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to actually start and pay attention to it and do something with it, or are you going to ignore it? And there's no judgment there, by the way. No shame, no blame, no guilt, no judgment. We don't do that here. But you can sit there and continue to ignore it, or you can sit there and go, you know what? This is a part of who and what I am. I have forgotten it for a while, but maybe, just maybe, I might want to start paying attention to it and see what's in there, right? So therefore, she realized that she was a spiritual being, and more than that, that she was more than just her body. See, prior to that, she didn't even know that she had this thing inside of her. She didn't even know she was more than her body. She had no clue that she was a spiritual being at all. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, you mean I have another part of me my whole life I've lived and I wasn't even aware of it? And that's the truth. And so she started to pay attention to it. She started to listen to it, right? So, by using her directive power, she could change her life. So in other words, she wasn't a victim anymore. She became a powerful, conscious creator, like I talked about, right? And she started to use affirmative prayer, and she became this powerful co-creator with God, and she began her spiritual practice. Because up until that point in time, again, there's no spiritual practice. And what we believe at Unity is that when you start to learn these principles that we're talking about, and you start to practice them, you're going to soon realize is that by practicing them on a regular basis, that's the thing that makes all the difference in the world, right? And so at the heart of all of this transformation was ultimately her relationships. I want you to think about that for a minute. So she's sitting there having this experience prior to her awakening. She starts to wake up. She starts doing all of these things. And at the heart of it, as living as a conscious creator, as she started becoming more aware, as she healed her body, and then ultimately creating this movement called Unity, she started to change her relationships. Who did she change her relationships with? What were those relationships? Oh, I don't know. How about her? How about her relationships with God? How about her relationships with her body? How about her relationships with her life? Do you think that those relationships didn't change as she began doing her work. Clearly they did. And she started living as a whole new person. And what I'm here to tell you is that just like Myrtle, just like Charles, just like Jesus, just like anybody else, you can start the same journey. You have that same piece of divinity in you. You do. It's just a matter of what do you decide to do with it. And it's a decision, folks. It all started, remember this, it all started with a decision. She all of a sudden realized, hey, I can do something differently. I don't have to be a victim. I can actually start to embrace these new principles. I can start studying these principles. I can start applying these principles. And as a result, her life started to change. And what I'm telling you, each and every one of you, you have the same thing inside of you. You do. And so now it's like, well, what do I do with that? Right? And by the way, Spirit is not going to show up, well, it can, but I'm just going to say in general, Spirit is very gentle, Spirit is very kind, Spirit is very loving. So it's not like it's going to chase you. That's not how it works. Spirit is always there. So then it's just a matter of, do you tune into it? Do you start to listen to it? Do you start to let that guide you, that part of you? And when you do, all of a sudden, things start to change. Life starts to open up. You start being directed and guided by the thing that's calling you home, because ultimately, if you feel like there's something more, if you are one of the ones that are getting the tap on the shoulder that says there has to be something more than this traditional message, that's what it is. It's your spirit that's calling you home. And I know many, many, many of you have gone through some really hard times. I get it. I went through some pretty hard times. We all did. But ultimately, it's to lead us back into ourselves, back connected into our heart, back connected to Source, back connected to God. That's where we're all going. We're all going there. So, with that, I just wanted to mention, and by the way, these things that she did, Unity put them into a nice little box called the 5 principles. Our 5 principles are God, or good, is the creator of all things. The second principle, we are the children of God, and therefore we are good. We create our experience by our thoughts, our emotions, our words, or our actions, or what I call the directive power. That's what Fillmore called it. By using affirmative prayer, we become powerful co-creators with God. And knowledge of these principles is not enough. We must live them. That's what Myrtle did. And this morning, I invite you into the possibility, if there's something that's going on, or if any of this is resonating with you, you have the ability to make the same decision. Because that's all it is. Nobody's going to make that decision for you. And Spirit is not going to show up and say, you have to do this. That's not how it works. Again, it's something that you decide, yeah, I'm ready for this thing. And then ultimately, you can do whatever you want to with it, because it's going to start to guide you.